Hello, hello, welcome back. Well, it's been a while, hasn't it? Alright, I'm almost better. I'm still a bit crook in the head and that, but I'm definitely getting out. I'll tell you what, that was the worst flu I've had in over a decade. I hardly ever get sick, and I'm not one of those people that are very good to be around when they're sick, because I can't stand just laying around doing nothing. So today I picked beef lasagna because it's something I've been making for 30 odd years. I can make it with my eyes closed, so I don't have to think too much. Alright, are you ready for this? Okay, what we need first is we need a kilo of beef mince, mushrooms, a couple of onions. I've got 8 slices of bacon tops there, some fresh basil and fresh oregano. If you don't have it, you can use dried. So I've got some fresh basil today, but I don't have any oregano, so I'm going to use some dry oregano, and I'll tell you the measurements as we're doing it. Alright, now back in the day when I used to make this, before these dolmios come out, these pasta sauces, I absolutely love them now and I use them all the time. But back when I was first making it for the first decade or so, we didn't have things like that. So what I would do is use a couple of cans of diced tomatoes and a little bit more tomato paste, and I wouldn't use that at all. But for the last couple of decades since they've been around, I use them too. So if you don't have them, instead of using 1 can of diced tomatoes, use 2 cans and just add a bit more tomato paste. Alright, so I use a jar of dolmio, I use tomato paste, I use 1 can of diced tomatoes. It doesn't matter what, that's a 400 gram can, it doesn't matter if it's more or less, it really doesn't. And if you've got fresh garlic, use fresh garlic, but I'm using my jar garlic, and because everyone's getting over being crook and that, I'm going to put a ton of it in today. So this is one of those recipes that you can take stuff out, you can definitely add stuff to it, and you can do it however you like it, alright? Okay, first thing we've got to do is we grab our 2 onions and we peel and chop them up, stick them in a bowl and set them aside. So the next thing we need to do is our mushies. Now I've got about 10 of those medium sort, I think they're called button, I'm not sure what they're called actually. I usually get these because they're the cheapest one of all of them. You can use any mushrooms you can get your hands on. Use your canned mushrooms, you can use the big ass ones, it really doesn't matter. So, and you can use as little or as many as you like. Now when it comes to cutting them up, when I like doing my pastas and lasagnas and that, I love seeing big slices, but my family's very precious, and my granddaughter and my son have got something against mushrooms. So because they're going to be eating it, I just chop them up really, really small. And I forgot to say, wash the buggers really, really good, because they've got a lot of hidden dirt in them. Once we've chopped all our mushies up, the next thing we want to do is get our 8 slices of bacon tops, and we just want to roughly dice it up. Alright, set that aside. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is our fresh herbs. Okay, so I've got the fresh basil, but I've got the dry oregano. So I would say a tablespoon of chopped fresh basil and a tablespoon of chopped fresh oregano. Or if you're using dry, I would use 2 teaspoons. I'll write the recipe below as always for you guys, and I'll put in all the ifs, buts and ahs. So I've chopped about 2 tablespoons. So me personally, I love lots of herbs in there. So if you're not into them that much, the tablespoon is perfect. But if you're like me and you like that sort of stuff, literally put in as much as you want. Alrighty, now we've got everything chopped up and ready to go. I am going to be cooking in my electric frying pan. But you can cook this in anything you want. So you can do it in a big frying pan on the stove. You can do it in a saucepan. It absolutely doesn't matter. So we want to whack our pans or saucepans on medium. The first thing we want to do is just sprinkle a little bit of olive oil, or if you don't have olive oil, any oil you've got in there. So we throw our onion, our bacon, garlic. Now if you're using fresh garlic, I'd probably use a minimum of 2 cloves of garlic crushed. And if you're using the jar garlic, I'd use a minimum of 2 heaped teaspoons of garlic. I'm going to put 3 heaped ones in today. Now I'll throw in my fresh herbs or my dried herbs. So I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of the dried oregano in. Now we want to give it a really good toss around for a few minutes until everything's got a beautiful little bit of colour starting to happen. Oh mate, it smells amazing in here already. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to get our mince and we want to break it up as we throw it in there and chuck all our mince in. Just turn it off for 2 seconds so I can actually talk to you and there's not that much steam that you can't see a thing. Okay, so when it comes to the mince, right, All I do is brown it for a couple of minutes. I don't cook it through because I believe if you cook it through, you kind of like got this dry mince and then you've got a dry sauce, and you don't want that. So I seen on that MasterChef once that they were cracking the shits because this lady only browned it and she didn't cook it through. And I thought, well, that's bloody madness, because they make that stupid tartar whatever crap and they're eating mince raw, so I don't know what they're on about. So you would brown it just like you would any other meat before you cook it. So just brown it for a couple of minutes, you don't cook it through. Alrighty, a couple of minutes later and we have browned our mince. Now we want to throw in our can of diced tomatoes. Now if you're not using the pasta sauce, you would put 2 cans of diced tomatoes in. So I'm using a 500 gram jar of the dolmio pasta sauce today. I put a little bit of water in the bottom, chuck the lid on, shake the shit out of it, and pour that in as well. Now I use 2 tablespoons of the tomato paste, but if you were just using the diced tomatoes, I would put 4 tablespoons in. Give it a good mix through. Because of the shocking lighting I've got in here, you're not going to see how dark red it is, but in real life it's a little bit darker than that. Okay, so what we do now is, because I'm using the electric frying pan and it's a lot bigger surface, it will thicken a lot quicker. So I'm going to cook it for about 15 to 20 minutes on a very light simmer, but I'll put the lid on. Now if you're cooking it in a saucepan, because it's a smaller space and you've got a lot more juice in there, you can cook it for longer and you don't need the lid on, alright? So what we want to do now is a very, very light simmer, and we want to do that for at least 15 minutes. Some people can cook the spaghettis for hours if they want, especially if you're doing, like, when I used to do a bucket load in a huge one, I'd have that pot going for a few hours. But when you're just doing it for a small family, you know what I mean, you don't need to. So yeah, let's simmer it away. If you're doing it in a frying pan, whack a cover on it. Alrighty, 20 minutes later and it smells freaking amazing. I think this is the first day I can actually smell stuff. And what a thing to smell. Okay, so now in the frying pan I've taken the lid off, and now I will leave the lid off. So what we do next when we're ready is we add our mushrooms, mix our mushies through. Now we only need to cook it for another couple of minutes. Now if you're doing it like me in the frying pan, you can definitely cook it longer and make the sauce really, really thick if you want. It's totally up to you. I'll definitely simmer it for another I'll probably simmer it for another 5 minutes at least and get this a little bit thicker. I do love a nice thick sauce. Alrighty, 5 minutes later and I've got it exactly how I love it. Okay, so turn your power off or take it off the heat, turn your heat off. Now you just stick a lid or something on it and we just leave it sit there while we make the cheese sauce. Oh yeah, baby. Cheese sauce. Okay, first thing is the cheese. So the cheese I always use and I absolutely love for cheese sauces is the shelf life one, and it's the cheddar. So it's either the Dairy Lee or the Kraft, alright? And if you've never got them before, you'll find them where your Vegemites and jams and that are. You'll find it there somewhere. But these are just amazing for sauces. It just melts in beautifully. Now if you don't have this or you can't get this, I have made it with every single cheese possible you can think of, alright? So whatever you can get your hands on. This is a 500 gram block and I'm only going to use 250 grams. So I'm going to chop 250 grams off and I'm going to grate it up. Once we've grated our cheese, we want to set that aside for a minute. We want to get out a large saucepan and we want to throw roughly a 50 gram block of butter in there. We'll sit it on our stovetop till we're ready. The next thing we want to do is we want to get a 1/4 cup of plain flour. We want to use 1 teaspoon of dry mustard powder, 1/2 teaspoon of paprika. I love using sweet paprika in this one, but you can use any paprika you got, it doesn't matter. So 1/2 teaspoon. Now we want to crack a little bit of salt and pepper onto there. We want to get out some milk and a cup measurement and we're ready to go. So the first thing we want to do is we want to put our saucepan on a medium heat and we want to melt our butter down. Once we've melted our butter, we want to get our flour mixture and put that in there. Now you want to stir it really, really well and get all the lumps out. Okay, once we've stirred it really well and we've got the lumps out, it will start in a minute, when it gets hot enough, it will start to foam a little bit. Now what we want to do is cook it for 1 minute. I'll show you when it starts to foam. Now you can see it's starting to foam. So what we want to do now is cook it for 1 minute so we can cook the flour out and constantly scrape and stir the bottom so it doesn't stick at all. Alright, once our minute is up and we've cooked all our flour out, take it straight off the heat for a minute. Alright, now while it's off the heat, we want to add 3 cups of milk, and we just want to pour it in slowly while we mix it through. Alright, once we've mixed it all through, we now want to put it back on the heat, constantly stir it until it just goes to boil. Just before it starts boiling, take it back off the heat. So you notice just before it starts to boil, it starts thickening up. Once you can feel that thicker on your spoon while you're stirring it, you know it's almost ready to take off for a minute. Now we want to add all our cheese. Now we just want to mix it in really well, and then we're going to stick it back on the stove top only for a couple of minutes until you cannot see the cheese anymore. Alrighty, once we've got it beautiful and smooth like that, she's ready. Take it off the heat, turn it off. Now we've got everything made and we're ready to put this bad boy together. The first thing we want to do is preheat our ovens at 180 degrees Celsius. Now there's a few ways that you can make this. You can make it in an oven-proof dish like that, or today I'm going to do it in foils because I just want to show you how you can make it and freeze it, or make it to take it to a party or something, or make them if you're single and you want to just make a heap up. Like, you can make this up and then you can cut them all up and freeze them. They're brilliant to freeze. It lasts 3 to 6 months in the freezer, and you can just pull one out every time you want a meal. Like, it's brilliant. So I like using these. Alright, so these are like the foil tins with the lids. Now I'm going to do the family size one today, but you can also buy the, I think it's 4 or 6 packs of, you know, the smaller foils with the lids. So if you wanted, you could make them all in them and cook them all up in them, and then you've got single little stirs when you want to just throw them in the oven from frozen. Alright, so I'm going to grab one of these. So the first thing we want to do is give our pasta sauce a good stir. And then we want to roughly divide it into 4, or imagine it as 4. Alright, so we want to put the first quarter of the sauce in, and we just want to smooth that out evenly along the bottom. Now at this stage, depending what you put on it, I've got a mate of mine that years ago used to make me lasagnas all the time, and he would use peas and boiled egg. So he'd get the frozen peas out, he'd boil up the eggs and then peel them and chop them up, and he'd sprinkle some peas on there now and sprinkle some chopped cooked egg on there, and then do the next layer. It's actually really nice, but I like doing my wagyu one, but yeah, his was so nice. I don't know if it was because he always made the effort to cook it or what it was, but it was beautiful. Now for the pasta sheets. So I like using the flat dried ones. So these are Woolies ones. I haven't used these ones before. They're 250 gram packet, and I'll be using these. Now if you want to use the fresh pasta sheets that you get out of the fridge, you probably need a couple of packs of them, and with those ones, when you cook it, it comes out really, really thin. So if you're going to use the fresh stuff, what I love to do is put a layer of the fresh on, then put the cheese sauce on, and then another layer of the fresh, and it sort of traps the cheese sauce in there, and it makes the pasta a bit more. It does not matter what sheets you want to use, any are good enough, alright? So you just lay your sheets on, break them all up so they fit. It doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't matter what it looks like. Alright, once we put the first layer on, give our cheese sauce a stir, and then we want to grab a cup measurement out and chuck a cup on there. Just get the back of a spoon and spread it all out so it's covering everything. Once we've done that, we put our next quarter of our meat on. To our last layer, we've got our pasta sheets down. Now 1 packet of pasta sheets was plenty. I've still got 1.5 left, so that worked out perfect. Alright, so this time I swap it around. I put the last lot of meat on first. Alright, and then I drizzle the cheese sauce all over it. Now, it's probably got about half a cup too much cheese sauce in there, but that's great because you'd rather have too much than not enough. It's a bugger if it's not enough. Now, to make sure that your pasta cooks properly, you absolutely have to have enough juices going. Do you know what I mean? If it's too dry, you won't cook your pasta. So don't be scared. So when we go to cook it, no matter what you cook it in, always sit it on a cookie tray. So if anything overflows out, it doesn't go around the bottom, doesn't get your smoke alarm set off, it won't make it smell like crap. Alright, so always put it on a cookie tray. Now it's perfectly ready to go like that, but as an optional thing if you want to, if you've got some mozzarella cheese, you can put some of that over the top. Now once you've done that, if you've got some dry breadcrumbs, this is optional as well, but you can sprinkle them all over the top and it gives it that little crunchy, chewy, that yumminess on the top. Now if you don't put the mozzarella on there, you can still put the breadcrumbs on there with just the sauce. Now that's optional, you don't have to if you don't want to, but I always do. Okay, now we stick it on our tray, we shove it in our oven. Now we cook it for around an hour, so every oven's different. So the best thing to do is around the 55-minute mark. Grab a knife and stick it through a couple of spots. If it goes through nice and easy, you know your pasta's cooked. Oh yeah, baby. It smells freaking amazing in here. Alright, that took exactly 55 minutes in my electric oven. Alright, see it spilled out over the side. If I didn't have that there, it would have been an absolute mess. Now that will literally stay hot like that for ages. So now I'll set that aside, get all the sides I want to get with it, however you want to do it, do you know what I mean? Get all your plates out. I always leave it a good 10 minutes just to settle anyway and sort of all come in together and do its yumminess. Okay, so now if you were going to make these to freeze them, what I would do is let it completely cool down. Alright, once it's still just a little bit warm, you can scrape all the edges in so you can put the lid on. Alright, put the lid on, cover it all up. Put a tea towel in the fridge and put it on that because it will still be very warm on the bottom. Once it goes completely cold, just write lasagna on it and throw it in the freezer. Now, once you get it out the freezer, you preheat your oven first at 180 degrees Celsius. You put it in there with the lid on, frozen, straight from the freezer, for 1 hour. Then you take the lid off and you cook it for another 20 to 30 minutes. And to check how you know it's ready is you'll stick a normal butter knife straight in the guts of it, leave it in there for a second and then pull it out and feel it. If it still feels cold, it's still not ready. If it's boiling hot, it's perfect. So I would serve it with chips and salad. So for all you lovelies out there that live on your own, if you want to wrap and freeze single serves, the easiest way to do it is stick it in the fridge until it goes completely cold. It's a lot easier to cut into the pieces and wrap them. So you put your slice on your Glad wrap, and then you just wrap it like a so, and stick them in the freezer. And when you want to serve, like when you want to cook them up, you take them out of the freezer, you take the Glad wrap off while it's frozen, sit it on the plate, put alfoil over the top if you want to heat it up in the oven, put Glad wrap over the top if you want to nuke it, and you're done. And the nicest thing about it is you've already done the hard work and cooked it all. So when you go to do it again, all you got to do is heat a piece up, whack whatever you want on there with it. Oh yeah, that's what I forgot to say. So if you do our homemade garlic bread and you stick a few of them on the plate, oh, it's like a meal made in heaven. And just like that, lovelies, you've got 4, 5, 6 meals ready to go. Oh, thank you guys so much for watching. Have yourselves a cracker of a night, and I'll see you soon.